Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cowboys of the Osage podcast, brought to you by the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum, located in historic downtown Pawhuska, Oklahoma. It's old Cody over here, and as always, I have my co-host with me, Mr. Rodeo Historian himself, Jimbo Snively. Hey, Jimbo, where are we at today, and who are we talking to?
Hey, Cody boy, it's just another great day in Osage, man. Cody, we're at Ponca City, Oklahoma, in the home of Mr. Frank Braden. Frank was one of the really good steer ropers and calf ropers back in the 60s. He made the finals like 3 times in the steer roping, and just one of the really top ropers, and roped with all those greats like Olin and Sonny Davis and guys like that, Jim Bob, and I'm sure he's got a lot of old stories to tell us. And his dad actually knew Henry Grammer. And he's probably knows about as much about Henry Grammer as anybody living today. So we're going to get into all that. And Frank had some boys that roped good, and Bucky was Rookie of the Year, and a couple of grandsons are top team ropers. And so they're just a pretty ropey bunch and a lot of history there. So we're going to get into all that. And Frank, welcome to the Cowboys of the Osage podcast.
Okay, thank you for coming over. Appreciate it.
Well, Frank, where were you born and raised at?
I was born and raised right here in Ponca City, only on the Osage County line. That's been 85 years ago.
Gosh, dang. Time flies when you're having fun, don't it?
Yeah, I think it does, for sure.
How are them grandboys of yours doing? Are they roping up a storm, both of them?
Barry doesn't rope much anymore. He'd had a accident or two, and he's got a boy that ropes pretty good, and he lives in Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
And I don't get to see him but 2 or 3 times a year, but Barry had a car wreck or two, and it just messed up his shoulders, and anyway, he just can't, he's just does more work than he does roping anymore. He got to the age where it's not as much fun. So,
boy, howdy, that ain't like him at all to work over rope. Usually he would rope over work.
Yes, that's right.
What's wrong with him, Jimbo?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he's smarter than some of us.
What did your family do here in Osage County when you were growing up?
Well, we handled some cattle and had a few mares and colts and stuff that way. We raised our own horses, and anyway, it was just in the wintertime we'd put cattle on wheat, and in the summertime we had grass enough to handle a few steers and stuff, and it was just everybody's worked for the other one kind of, but when we was younger people. But anyway, it's the horse business is kind of going out, and got rid of the mares and got too old to worry about it anymore. So,
Did your dad rope any, Frank?
Yeah, he could rope, but that's, he just kind of a pasture roper. Mm-hmm. He had bad knees, and he couldn't get off a horse, but he could sure go rope one and turn him around. But he just he didn't really worry about the kids. If you want to rope, you just rope. If you don't, you don't. So
yeah.
But I've got a brother that he wouldn't give $30 for all the horses in Oklahoma. Why, I don't know. But anyway, I still handle a few horses and stuff myself. But I got to have somebody to do the roping anymore. I don't have a.
Who taught you to rope, Frank?
Sir?
Who did all the teaching on you to rope? Who taught you how to rope?
Well, I hate to say it, but nobody. I just had to learn it myself, and how to go about training a horse to rope steers on or rope calves on, and I've had 2 or 3 pretty good horses. And anyway, it's just it's always been my life is to rope, but I didn't have a early enough trainer. Time you learn something about a horse, well, you kind of got to do what he wants to do up to a point. But anyway, I had a horse one time that he was bad in a chute that I'd bought. And anyway, he'd just spin around that chute like a bull would a spinning. And so I got me about a 2-foot chain. And anyway, when he went to spinning, I hit him right between the ears. And he turned around and he run off and jumped the fence with me. Only thing, he jumped about 4 inches too low. And when he hit the ground, I was still astraddle of him upside down. And it took about 6 months to get over that. But it broke my pelvis in 2 or 3 places and a lot of ribs. And so I learned a little bit there, But there wasn't nobody around to tell you not to do it, But I did find out, so. And I've had a horse a calf pony that he was well broke. He was just a coming 4-year-old, but he'd had a few cattle cut on him and handled good and had a natural stop. In 30 days, I hauled him to his first rodeo. But when he stopped, he just jumped back. He didn't drag his feet back. He'd jump back. And if you had your hand on the saddle horn, you'd be pinned to him until but he'd just bow up and just jump straight backwards and just tear a calf's head off. And I couldn't practice much on him because he's killing my calves. But anyway, we had a pretty good season or two, and back then, those days, you could jerk a calf down on his head or whatever, but he'd jerk him up in the air. Then that's when he jumped back. And he wouldn't, he wouldn't sit up or nothing. He'd just run his heart out, and then you'd rope, and he just about beat you to every punch. And anyway, nowadays, you'd rope a calf, jerk him down, they flag you out or charge you $50 fine or something. He would be worth nothing now, but in his days, you couldn't drive up to a roping that somebody was wanting to try to buy him. And finally got to where I went ahead and sold him. But he made a good horse for a lot of people. I think Kelly Corbin wound up with him when he was an older horse. And he was he's the grandson of Leo, and he could run and he could stop, and he's real active. But anyway, I had a lot of fun out of him. I never hit him with a rope, never done nothing to him, but I roped a calf at a roping, and that rope broke and hit him right between the eyes. And it took about a month to get him to where he wouldn't drag a calf out from under you. But I never hit him with a rope or never had to do anything to him, just ride him, and he scored good. He was a smart horse. But anyway, I just had just a decent kind of horse to start with, and log them and just rope enough steers on them. Just keep a rope until they got right. So,
how big were them calves you were roping back then, jerking them down?
Well, it'd just be somewhere between 2 and 250 or something like that. But he could jerk a calf down if that calf would just be a loping. I mean, he'd just tear one's head off. He hurt the calves pretty bad. But in those days, you had to kind of have a good horse. But nowadays, jerk calf down, and if you don't be 6 or 7, 8 seconds, well, you don't get any money back. But them calves that you're roping nowadays, they couldn't take what he had. He was a natural horse. He just learned quick, and he didn't cheat you. And every time you wanted to tune him up, was just sit on him and kind of get him back a little bit and go roping, whether it's on grass or on plowed ground, But I had a lot of fun with him. But anyway, I had another calf pony coming on that I liked better. But anyway, somebody wanted him worse than I did. So anyway.
Well, that's the way the world goes around.
Yep.
Well, you, like most people, I guess, started out calf roping. When did you get the steer roping bug?
Well, I was probably about 15 years old, 16, somewhere in there. But I didn't get to rope with anybody. I've never seen anybody log a horse or or rate a horse, or learn him to rate himself. You can't rope and be pulling on your horse to slow him down in the steer ropers. You got to. I made some thing that I used on horses, and it you could take all the runaway horses away from him. But anyway, you'd all you got to do is run to a steer take a week to do it, but I'd probably do it in 2 or 3 days. But I had an easy stop that I had made, and you talk to a horse, use your voice. You'd be running to a steer too fast and say, whoa, whoa, and that horse would just back off and rate. But I kind of like the horse that would duck off. And the way I roped, or tried to, I would, you rope his horns and you'd already have your trip, so they couldn't get away from you. They thought they was ducking off, but I could rope on him, and I had a horse that I needed to win some money, and every time I roped, but it really made a good horse out of them, where you just can't rope and have a pulling on his head or having to duck him off or nothing. I used to take a piece of baling wire and whip them down over the jaw on the right side so they'd sure enough get away, and you don't leave a steer standing very long when you got your trip down. So anyway,
Got a call coming in.
That you?
No, sir.
Oh.
That's Frank. Here, Leslie, you want to take it from him?
Good stuff.
There it went.
You said you used to rope on grass. Was that quite a bit, or was that just at rodeos at like Pendleton?
Well, at Fairfax, they had a grass arena for a lot of years when I was a kid growing up. And anyway, I didn't know any better one to another, but I never did have a horse jerk down or nothing like that, but they'd slide a long ways and kind of burn their hocks once in a while. But anyway, it was just and at Pendleton, I roped up there, and I never did get a horse down, but I did get my ankle broke. Horse ducked out from under me up there one time, and anyway, there's a plastic fence around the racetrack and the arena, and that horse looked up and saw that I'd stepped over in the stirrup. Anyway, I knew he was going way too fast. Well, I stepped over that stirrup on the steer, and that horse ducked away and just dropped me down on my left foot and throwed my ankle out of place and broke it. And it was only about 1,800 mile drive home with a big old cast on your foot, so had about all that I wanted. So, but anyway, it's been a kind of an experience that you probably have to just go through yourself to see what's what. But the roping nowadays out there is not anything like what it used to be. They used to bulldog them steers at Cheyenne, and then they'd take them out to Pendleton, Oregon, put them up in the mountains and let them fill up with grass and stuff. And when they'd turn you loose, you had the width of the racetrack around there to be, you could have that much room to go to rating your horse back so you didn't break the barrier. But them cattle would run hard. And if you go be 20, 21 or 2, you're liable to win a day money. But I saw Clark McIntyre run one out of sight out there one time, and he tied him 17 seconds, but he was way down the arena. And I thought there'll be somebody slip in on one of them steers that don't run. And they never did, and it let him win the day money, and it was a pretty good run. He tied good and roped good too, but anyway, it just you could jump the horse over that plastic fence if you could get him to, but that's not natural for most rodeo folks' horse, but this old horse just ducked out and went right, and I went left. So after I got home, they never did let the swelling come in my leg. They just put a cast on it. And by the time I got home, I'm telling you what, I was tired of that damn cast on my leg. So I went up there and to our doctor here at Ponca City, and the nurse come in there to see what I needed. And I said, I need somebody to cut this cast off. I said, I'm tired of it. So anyway, she took it off, and she said, you be sure and come back in the morning. And said, we'll put you on another cast. And I said, well, don't wait on me to come back, but I sure do want you to take it off right now if you don't mind. So and we did that, and everything healed up in about 2 or 3 months, and away we went again. But it was just a freak accident. But I don't know. I had a few times that I got a half hitch over my arm one time on a young horse, and if it'd been a real good horse and a 300-pound calf, I think it'd cut the arm off. And I can still show you on my arm where it cut into my hide. So anyway, it's just been a learning process through my life, it seems like. But
Do you know Richard Gonzalez?
yes, I do.
Here, I don't know, it's been a few years ago, but he got a half hitch over his arm,
Yeah.
calf roping, and it cut his wrist off, completely off, and they reattached it.
Yeah.
They sewed it all back on. They cut his hand completely off, Jimbo, and they sewed that booger back on. Can you believe that?
I remember one guy that got it around his neck, roping calf. Who was it? Was that Ab Deacon, or who was that?
Well, there was a boy that I was roping with him and stuff at certain rodeos up in Wyoming, and anyway, that boy got a half hitch around his neck, and the horse run off and run to a fence, and he had to talk through a little new made voice thing. So, but anyway, he made it through it with that half hitch around his neck. So he don't know how he got it or where he's going to get another one, but that's what he told me, because I was riding around there with him. I said, I got a half hitch over a damn arm, and I said, I know what it'd feel like, what you're going through. And he said, yeah. He said, I'm lucky to be alive. I don't know he was, so, but he had that hole in his throat, so it looked bad.
Sounds like a bad old deal.
Anytime that a rope is tied solid to your saddle horn and something goes haywire, you're going to get the worst end of the deal. So
Person shouldn't have a rope practice arena by themselves, you know.
that's right.
You ought to always have somebody there and with a good sharp knife that can help you.
But most of the time,
Especially if you're roping steers or calves.
Yeah. Like you said, if you're tied solid.
well, if most of the time, I'd say that 90% of the accidents is at home and practicing, because you rope so much more there at home and young horses, and you just don't pay attention, you know. And it's something that you got to just be told, and if you don't do a rope right and stuff, well, of course you can't dally and do much calf roping. But anyway, you just got to be a little careful, and you can't over push a horse too hard. You don't need to whip him with a rope. Show him something 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times, whatever it takes. And then it goes to the point where you put a stop on a horse that just can't even stop. I got enough material here at my house that if you run 10 calves on him, he'll start stopping like when you want him to, and he'll lay down and do you a job. But anyway, some horses can take it, some of them can't. You know, they get all hyper and stuff, and they don't need to rope 40 or 50 calves a day on a horse. But you gotta run 10 or 12 calves a day, and tomorrow he'll be a little better horse. You got to have a horse that keeps doing his job. What you train him to run to the same place. When your slack goes by his head, well, he needs to be laying down and stopping. But any more than little old calves they rope and stuff, well, you just don't want to jerk one down. It takes too long to get them up, and stuff, but they just rope littler calves, and their horses don't stop near that's good. But
Well, the steer horses are a lot different now too today, aren't they, Frank?
yes, they are. They are, absolutely.
I mean, they used to have trouble with horses charging,
Yeah.
Like you were talking about them rating, they'd charge and
Yeah.
they'd go more by the cattle, and then they'd circle to the right after you got off. And a lot of time roll the steer back on his feet and stuff.
Right.
That was a problem.
That's exactly right.
And you don't see that anymore.
No. Well, they rope them little old steers weigh about 450 pounds, and I've roped a steer or two that would weigh 1,000 or over.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you'll sit down when you get to the end of it, and then a horse can drag. It's been logged right. But anyway, these modern day 10, 12 second steers they just have to have a little old horse about 14 hands and let you rope and go on from there. But
Yeah.
they got to drag a steer straight. Whichever way you point him, he needs to go straight.
Right.
And go to the left, and he don't want to step to the right anymore either. So
Right.
anyway, I think it's good to rope with somebody that has already roped, and I never got that opportunity. And we had to kind of get the right kind of horse to start with, and I've roped on a steer horse one time, and he'd never been logged, but he's really a cowboy horse. I mean, he was a nice horse, and I tied 3 or 4 steers on him there one day, and that was just decent. Yeah, there wasn't no training to it. He just, when you rope steer, you wasn't trying to be, 14 or 16 or something like that. You just go, if you can tie a steer in 20 seconds on a green horse, you've done a pretty good job. So anyway, that's just, there's guys that's roping really good nowadays, and they probably don't even know hardly how to shoe their own horse, They got too much money in their pockets, and I never was at that problem. So
This rodeoing was hard on my pocket, to be honest with you, my whole life.
yeah,
But there ain't a better life for me.
You mentioned Clark McIntyre a while ago, and you roped against some of the all-time greats, didn't you, in your era?
yes, it was
Some of the greatest that's ever lived, Jimbo.
Right.
Sonny Davis was awful good roper and quick. He wanted to be quick, and he could be.
I always ask people that was from that time period, what would Sonny Davis tie these cattle in today?
Oh, I'd say he could be. I could say he could be 10 just about any time of the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just had a natural rack. Whenever he got one roped, what he's done, turning left. He don't worry about the rest of it. But anyway, he's had some pretty bad wrecks in his life too.
Right.
I know he swallowed his tongue up there one time, and a lady happened to know what was wrong with him, and she took a pocket knife and pried him apart. He'd swallowed his tongue, see. Well, that's kind of bad news, but he kind of got in the jam down and at the end of the arena. I don't know what his real problem was, but he was in bad shape when he hit the ground, so he lived right on foot, but he had a terrible good horse, and you couldn't tell how good the horse was because he could rope as good as the horse was. He was really a good horse, and he was really chargy. It's a Palomino horse.
Yeah, I remember him.
Do you?
Big Britches or something, I think he called him, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. But he just, if he got a trip, fine. If not, he'd jerk a steer right out of his shoes off of him. So he was a stout horse, and if you just hit him straight ahead with no trip on him, he's going to go down anyway. So, just like that. But there was some Jim Bob Altizer and them kind of guys, and that's when Everett Shaw was roping, and he was really a good roper and had good horses. But he was trying to shoot for 18 or 20 second tie, but time just goes on and people get to being a little quicker, So, but anyway, I had to start with my horses. It was just horses, and I learned a little bit every day, and had some bad wrecks with them. And I never did jerk one down on me, but I've been pretty close to losing the arm and stuff, just roping calves, and I thought that's about as bad as I want to get. So anyway, that old chiropractor, I had to go to him for a doctor. When I had my arm laying on a pillow, I had about 15 miles to town, and anyway, the time we got there, my wife was driving a car, and I said, I sure wish you'd miss them bumps and just slow down a little bit. Anyway, that doctor reached to get my arm, and I said, Doc, she's broke. I said, ain't no need to worry about taking an x-ray. But he went ahead and got my arm and looked at it, and the pictures and stuff, and he said, you big baby, he said, that arm's not even broke. I said, look where this rope come around there. He said, yeah, I can see where it's been, but he said, you don't want to do that too often. I said, I won't do it again, I promise it. And so far I didn't, but I probably won't ever get another chance to get it either. So anyway.
Boy, howdy, you broke your ankle up in Pendleton, you said, and
yes.
He did mention the 1,800-mile ride home. That's probably before interstates came along or anything. It's probably 2-lane road all the way up to Pendleton, 1,800 miles. What kind of rodeo rig did y'all have back then, Frank?
Oh, we just had pretty good pickups and stuff. And I had a pickup on propane and had a 100-gallon tank in the back. Underneath this camper had a bed over that propane tank. And anyway, we started out, and old Clark McIntyre said, I believe I'll just drive this old pickup till I get the first tank of gas out, and you can take over. And I said, well, good luck. And I said, I'll just ride with you then. He said, and we drove and drove and drove. And he said, I don't know how much gas mileage we were getting. He said, but I'm telling you what, said this gas gauge, they never give up. He said, it's just still on full. Anyway, we was way out in western Kansas, and I said, pull down to that co-op. He said, well, hell, we don't need any feed. I said, no, but I do. So we went down there, and I said, pull up that tank over there. And I got out, and that lady that run that co-op said, we don't have any help today, but said, you're welcome to go down there and fill her up with that propane. And I said, okay. So I got in the back and crawled out there and put that filler hose onto my tank. And old Clark said, what are you doing back there? And I said, well, I'm just going to get a little propane. He said, propane? What's that do? And I said, well, that takes the place of gasoline. Anyway, we put her back together and went up by there to pay her. And I said, we got so many gallons of propane. She said, well, I think it'd be about $7. We done burned about 100 gallons out. Anyway, old Clark started driving again. And I said, well, you want me to drive away? And he said, yeah, if you don't mind. Anyway, before we got home from Pendleton, he said, I'm going to go get me one of them propane systems. He said, I like yours. You could just about go 1,000 miles on that tank of gas. And I said, you go from Polk City to Denver and back home when you won't have to fill up. He said, it'd burn gas or propane, either one. But I said, well, just keep using this old pickup till she lays down. He said, I don't blame you, but he said, I'm going to sure get me one. That's whether he did or not, I don't know. But we had lots of fun and heard lots of stories and stuff that he usually not a big talker or nothing, but he just he got excited about everything that you did that he didn't know about. Old Clark did. Yeah, he just tell you about some stories and stuff that he'd had and experiences that was interesting. For me, it was. But you could get in that camper and you'll have to sleep 200-300 miles, not even wake up. So old Clark said, I like that too. And I said, well, when you get tired driving, I'll have to take her a little ways. But we made her out there and made her back, and he had a good time. Won a day money while I was there, and he just had like a a little kid the first time he went to town, I guess, I might say. But he was a good guy to travel with and had lots of experiences, and I like to hear that because he'd been around a long time.
What's one of them you can relay to us that he told you one time?
Sir?
What's one of those stories he told you one time?
Oh.
The best one.
On Clark?
That you can tell, yes, sir.
He said he had an old banker down there, and he said he was going along in winter time and was up getting some little cattle out of Florida, weigh about 300 pounds, and they needed to weigh 500. Anyway, he said, by God, my old banker died. Said, all you had to do is just go in there and tell him you bought so many head, and sign the note and go on. Said, that old man in the bank died. He said, man, I went in there one morning, and he said, I had a load of cattle I need to pay for. I said, they'd buy feed and pay for your cattle and everything. But anyway, this young guy said, well, Clark said he made out a note there, and he'd push it over for me to sign, and then he'd pull it back. And he'd slide it over there again, and he'd do the same thing. Said, when it come noon, that old banker said, well, by God, if that's the way you all done it, he said, I'm going to do it this time, but not again. Anyway, that old Clark signed that, but he said, I sat in there for 3 or 4 hours waiting on him to make his mind up. And he thought that was the greatest thing he'd ever invented, you know. And just thing after thing. And we went through a canyon out there to go into Pendleton, and he said, see that land right over there? And I said, yes, I do. He said, that thing is full of bones. He said they used to work a lot of these Chinese people, and he said their knuckles and just bones was laying out there on the thing. They was having a roping over it, and so they was out in the arena. They pushed the dirt up there and made a big arena and started steer roping. And he said, damn, you get to where you look down. Every time you look down, said there's some bones still coming to the top of the ground.
Wow.
But when they'd work the arena up, you know, and stuff. But he said it's kind of hard to rope for a steer too. He said, man, you just didn't know what he's going to do. But said it's kind of scared me. But anyway, he had just lots of horse stories and stuff. And anyway, he was trying to put a ranch together down there, and the land wasn't costing over about $10 an acre. And he said, you know, said, I could buy that, but he said, I just couldn't borrow that much money if they wanted. There's 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 acres right next to him. And he said, by God, he said, there's got to be some way. And he said, I could have sold half of it and made $2 or $3 an acre on it, but he said, I didn't want to break it up or do that. He said, I finally got the money together to get that thing bought, and $10 an acre. But he put 12,000, 15,000 acres together down there, and he was a poor boy rodeo hand, and he depended on that horse and his nylon rope. So that was his biggest thing that he worried about, was just, where's the rope in that? Let's go. So, but I had a lot of fun with him, and we done a lot of jabbering, you know. But anyway.
Well, a lot of people don't know that Clark's dad was also a world champion.
Yes.
Steer roper. Did you ever get to hang out with John McIntyre much?
No, he'd quit roping. Clark was hooking a car to a trailer one morning, a horse trailer, and he said, Dad hollered at me, he said, back up some more, and he said, and he hit his dad, and it kind of made him bad in the back, and he said he never could ride a horse or do anything like he used to do. But he said he made it and lived good. But anyway, it was sure enough. I know we went in his dad's house one time. It's a long tin shed, and you had to duck down to get in. It was where they had a window in there, a big window, and he just put screen doors on it. And at one end of the tin shack there was just cake feed, and stuff like that. And the other end was his bed, and had an ice box and a cooking stove and a round table. And he said that's all they had to it. But I said, what about that car out there? And we went down there to his dad's place there. And anyway, a new Ford car was sitting there. Had 4 flats on it. And I said, damn, Dad's going to have a bad time on this tire business. He said, well, you know, he bought that car, and he said there's a couple of women want to take a little drive in it. And he said, you know, they've gone for 2 or 3 weeks. And things like that, you know, he didn't worry about nothing, but it just, things like that just didn't bug him much. But I never did remember seeing him rope or anything like that, but he was a pretty good, sure enough, old-time rodeo hand. But they just lived from day to day, just, you know, he didn't have a cook or nothing, and everybody in the morning to stop there to drink coffee at his place, and that was at Limestone Gap, where it was. And anyway, we was down there, and it come a big rain, and old Clark's dad was there, and we walked outside, and it's kind of muddy and stuff. Went out there to a round pen, and there was a saddle laying right out in the middle of that round pen, and he said, say, Dad, that's old so-and-so saddle. He said, won't you take that saddle and put it in there dry somewhere? He said, yeah, that's a pretty good idea, isn't it? It's a borrowed saddle, see?
Yeah.
Anyway, he said he took that saddle, or I saw him take it myself, and he just throwed it over the fence, you know, hung it up on that round fence. That's as good as it got right there. He just let it rain on it anyway. So. But he just, he was a common guy that had a lot of experience and needed to win every time he went to a rodeo, about like anybody else. And anyway, he just, he'd go off and be gone for 2 or 3 weeks and stuff like that, you know, and come home. He made his ranch deal work, you know, a lot. And Reba kind of got to be a pretty famous singer, and I don't know, I'm sure that whatever they needed money-wise, that life was pretty good for him until he died, so.
Well, you'd think so anyway.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. We were talking to Paik the other day, and he told us about him and Reba's and first paying gig when they were singing was in the lobby at the hotel in Cheyenne. Ike Rude, gave him $1 or something?
Reverend Shaw, I think.
I thought it was Ike.
It could have been. I've heard both ways.
Yeah.
I think Paik said Ike that day.
Yeah.
So Ike Rude paid them for their first musical gig. But, you know, that's a pretty talented family.
Oh, yeah.
You know, 2 world champions.
Yeah.
And another guy that made the finals roping left-handed, which isn't supposed to be done anyway, steers very often. And 2 very musical daughters.
Yeah.
You know, that's quite the family. I mean, they really all did achieve something in life, I feel like.
Well, that's right. You know, that
and I'm proud to know them.
an old friend of mine that had loaned Clark a steer horse or a calf pony, and he wanted me to go down there with him and take that horse down there to Clark at his house. And he had a big old arena there and stuff. And boy, I run that calf out. He said he wanted me to get on him first, see if he's going to buck, I guess. But I'd been riding the horse all the time. And he was a green horse, kind of, but to be a rodeo hand. And anyway, I roped 2 or 3 calves on him. And I said, Clark, you want to rope some on him? He said, no. I said, I done seen all I need to. So, but he won second at Cheyenne one time. He won on that horse. And he won $1,600 on that horse. First time he took him to a rodeo.
That's big money back then.
Oh, yeah, it was. But anyway, had that old steer horse with us. It was kind of a kid pony, really. And old Clark pinned the steer there, and he said, well, get on that old pony there and tie this steer down. So I run out there, and I roped him and took my time. And I wasn't very old, probably 16, maybe 15, 16. Anyway, I tied that steer down. He said, well, come get another one. So I tied another one down, and he said, well, he's a pretty good old horse, ain't he? And he kind of stumbled around there, and I thought, well, he probably wants to keep a steer horse. Well, but he's one that would kind of, anybody that come to the roundup on that horse, well, he was usually a woman or a little kid or something. He's more of a kid pony than he was a steer horse. But old Clark, he didn't care where he run. He just kind of run in behind one and rope. But he was a pretty tough roper. And I know one time that he'd bought a horse and they called him Big Belly, and he had a lot of calves roped on him, and he bought him and it took him right straight to a steer roping and won the steer roping on him. But he was a Burt bred horse, and a kind of a rodeo type horses back then. And,
they still make good rodeo horses, I think, them Burt bred horses.
Yeah, that's what you got. But that's, he wasn't particular about a horse or nothing, really. We didn't charge or run over him. But Clark was kind of careful to run in behind the steer. He's afraid to get the front legs. The horse was charging, get his front legs and the steer's hind legs mixed up. Well, you're going to go for a fall in. That's why you want a horse to rate for you. So, but anyway, I got to where I would talk to my horse, and you want him to rate back, he definitely would. So, but I had a little tool I put on him, and he got to doing what he'd drag off a little bit, but if you'd put a jerk line on there and that easy stop and let him run the full distance, I got him to where you could just log him with a fence post, and he just run to you as hard as he could and just shut her down right then. But it took a little doing, but I had to rope by myself, so I didn't know what to do with him. So I knew what I had to do, because that's the only way I had known it. But I'd break away from 15 or 20 cattle a day, and he just kept being charged, and I didn't like that at all. So anyway, it's just young guys don't have to learn to shoe their horses and train their horses and stuff like that. There's too much money available, Somebody buys them a horse, they just go to roping. That's all they know. So,
well, they don't got that kind of time on their hands.
No,
they got to get to the rodeo.
Yeah,
right then. I guess, because I remember we made all our own horses growing up, for sure.
Yeah,
and put a lot of miles on them. When we wasn't roping on them, we'd use them on top of it.
Sure.
And it seemed like they sure lasted a lot longer.
Well,
than they do now. You'd see a lot of old horses being sold, letting people learn to rope on them and haul them. I mean, how many old horses back in your day did you see switch hands that stayed good horses, for a long, long time?
Yeah. I used to go with a guy once in a while. He had a little gray Wagner bred horse, and boy, you could tie steers on him as fast as you wanted to, or you could run in there behind the calf, and boy, he'd just tear a calf's head off. And he finally got to where he was a good bulldogging horse. He could really run. He was just the right size, about 14'2", and he was a smart horse. He could just do whatever you wanted to do, not what he's going to do, it's what you want him to do. So, but I kind of got to where I trusted him, and I rode him quite a bit. So,
what about ropes and pig and strings? You just didn't order them from Smith Brothers or the National Roper Supply. Were they pre-made back then, or did you have to make your own pig and strings? Did you have to tie your own ropes off? What's the difference in today's ropes and pig and strings than when you were using them, Mr. Frank?
Yeah. Well, we was out there at Pecos one time at the 4th of July rodeo, and here come old Clark with a whole batch of ropes and stuff. And he sat down there in the hallway of that hotel was where we was at, and staying in there, and then big old alleyways downstairs on the bottom there. And he strung this regular old rope things together, or made them about 6 foot or so. And he made them all up there, and he said, well, we got the winter supply of tie ropes. And I said, yeah. I said, looks like they'll work. He said, oh, yeah. I said, them's the only kind I ever used. But then nylon ropes come to the head, and everybody was using them nylon strings. But it's just everything, it changes. You know, they didn't have them poly ropes to rope horns or calves, either one. But I've got a rope right here that it's not big enough to even worry about, and that's what they're using for this head and healing. And I wouldn't trust it for nothing. It's a nylon combination stuff. Well, my grandson gave it to me one day and he said, you might need this. And I said, I sure probably will. Be a little use out of them. But anyway, he said, well, I want you to have this one. So, but he just bought it off the wall, you know, and I don't suppose anymore they could really make one to do the job. But I know that Alan Keller come to rope steers one time, and he was tying them with regular soft cotton ropes, you know, about big rounds of lead shank, you know, would be. That's what he tied steers with. But
that'd be tough to rope with. He must have been a roping dude.
I'd forgot about that. Well, that is what he was tying them with.
Oh, okay.
Tie strings.
Oh, well, gotcha,
Yeah.
yes.
And I'd forgot about that, but I remember him. Boy, he could put just a sloppy rat and a half hitch on it. It'd hold too, wouldn't it?
yeah, oh yeah, they would. But he wasn't, you know, 8 or 9 second steer horse roper, but he could sure tie a lot of steers. And
Yeah, and had a good horse.
yeah, 8 or 9.
But I'd forgot about those big strings he wore till you said, or used till you said that.
Yeah.
How long would a rope last you back then, Frank?
Well, I liked them poly ropes myself. I had one good nylon rope. It was a limber, soft rope, but you could rope shorthorn cattle, or you could rope some big cattle with the bigger loops. And then I got off it, and I got to use nothing but them poly ropes, because you could throw them quicker, and it just, to me, it was better for me personally. But that's kind of the way that I went. I don't know what they're used anymore, but these guys, it's all a different setup now. They don't score them very far, and they might have a little old horse that just kind of go to the end of it, and that's about it. But back when you was roping some cattle that weigh 800 or so, by God, it took a pretty good horse, and you wasn't worrying about that 10-second tie. If you could just get him tied in 18 or 20, 21, you've done a pretty good job. So if you was going to rope like 3 or 4 head at the same rodeo, but I'd use one, probably 4 or 5 steers, and then I'd get another one, because I knew that if it breaks down, it's going to break. And I never did break one roping a steer like that, but I didn't last them till they just wore out. They get soft and limber on the end and stuff that way where it goes around the horns, and they wrap them horns with some kind of stuff to protect the horns from burning in. Anyway, that kind of eats your rope up as you go too, so that's why I didn't trust the ropes that are roped with. But I like the poly ropes. They had some weight to them, and you could throw them a little farther and a little faster and stuff that way. So
Yeah, those little nylons, they didn't all feel good, did they?
yeah.
You know, some of them were light and stiffer, some of them were limber, but that's all they had at that time, you know, and that's what you rope with. But that was a big improvement when they went to those poly ropes.
Yeah.
I got one of those big nylons over at the museum right now in Pawhuska, and it's one of the old ones from when Ben Johnson was roping. And I tell you what, it still feels pretty good to this day to swinging. But it's one of the real old ones, the blue nylon or something they called it back then. But it was been broken one time because it spliced down there by the horn knot. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
but
I've seen that.
It still feels really good to this day. I mean, I feel like I picked it up and I said, this thing feels pretty darn good. So it's surprisingly a rope that's almost 100 years old feels that good.
That might have been the one he brought out there west of town with Harry Carey when I said he got Everett Shaw to splice Splash's rope.
It probably was.
It sure might have been the same rope. Isn't that funny?
There's been a good amount of rodeo cowboys come from this area.
Well, that's all I seen a lot more stuff go on, and it was kind of nice to. The only thing I hate about the rodeo deal is when it come to an end and you stay there in your camper till the next morning and there ain't nobody in sight.
It's over.
You drove 3 miles down beside the highway or something would have helped me, but wake up, nobody's there but you. So anyway, it was kind of fun, but I just didn't like to see it end, I guess, I suppose.
Who'd you travel with, Frank, besides Clark?
Oh, Ben Patterson.
Yep.
He was really a good travel boy.
Yeah.
I mean, he really was. If you wanted to stop and get a pop or a piece of ice cream or something, well, he'd just pull over. And we traveled pretty good. And he called me one time and he said, I was here in Polk City and I had a store at that time. And he said, say, I got us entered out at Pendleton, Oregon. He said, we need to be there in about 3 days or something. I said, Lordy, I can't go, Finn. I said, you just go to my place. He said, no. He said, I already got us entered and I can't get you undone. So anyway, he had a little horse that weighed about 950. And I'd had him at my house and roped on him quite a bit. And anyway, he got on there and he was going to win the roping. Or he did win the roping on that little horse, but I was probably at the end of 12, the top 12, I think, roped that year. And I made about the 5th or 6th place or something. And I roped before he did. Anyway, this little old steer stuck his head out, and then I tied him 15. And about 3 or 4 or 5 calves or steers later, Ben jumped out there and tied one about 17 or something and won the roping. I won second. And that little old horse, he didn't know any better. But he could drag the weight of what he was pretty near it. He had a lot of go and a lot of guts. But anyway, he was a nice little horse. But most guys wouldn't have took him to a rodeo probably. But Ben was a good hand with a horse. And he knew exactly what to do to make one stop and turn around. He didn't pet him or baby him around. When he got ready to do something, he done it. So, but anyway, it just you learn stuff every time that you go to a rodeo, it seems like, and you just got to kind of remember how to go home and train on it. So, but it's a fun deal. But back then, the entrance fees was $50, and some of them $60. And God, you go to Pendleton, it costs $100 to get the roping. So it'll probably cost $500 now. I don't know.
Probably. It's been a while since I've roped there, and I think it's $500 or $600 to rope there.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's not. I love that rodeo up there. It's honestly my favorite rodeo besides maybe Cheyenne. It's just a great rodeo. They've held true to a lot of their traditions, which I really respect and enjoy up there.
Oh
myself.
Yeah, it's a real good country up there. Good people there.
Yeah.
If you need something and ask somebody something, they can tell you. But in Cheyenne, I forget how many people it takes to run that thing.
Thousands.
I mean, and that you go to the parade, and it's worth watching. I thought it was. They got all kind of old farm machinery that they use with horses and teams and stuff, and I had a lot of enjoyment out of that. But anyway, the people was always nice to be out there, and everybody else. Nobody caused any trouble and stuff. And
some of the Cowboys did every now and then, but that's to be expected.
Oh yeah, well, they got their
idea of fun, and the townspeople idea was fun. Was two different things.
Well,
that week sometimes.
I tell you, that old boy used to be the representative for the Bulldoggers, and they get in fights and tear up stuff, And anyway, he called a meeting there for all the Bulldoggers, be at this meeting in the morning. Anyway, we sitting there. It wasn't nothing to me, but there wasn't nothing to do. But he gave them a talk and said, "Now, boys, we're going to quit this tearing up these cafes and fighting among ourselves and stuff." And he gave them a pretty good talk. And he called some of them names. Anyway, when he got done, he said, "Well, is anybody up there that feels like they want to change this thing or do something different?" He said, "Just get yourself down here and we'll talk it over." And anyway, that ended that. I mean, that conversation right there done a lot of good for people going to somebody's town and half tearing up a beer joint or some place that stayed open late at night. But it was, he was a good guy, and he knew what he's talking about. And that ended all the Bulldoggers. They'd all weigh 250 pounds, look like. They're just big old guys. But anyway, it was an enjoyment for me, but it just wasn't something that you could figure on going home and going to another one next week. You just go home, stay for a week or two, and maybe go to another one. But I had to be at home as much as I could, and you go to running out of money, you're going to go home anyway. So that's kind of the way it worked out.
What did you do at Cheyenne? Did you ever have much luck at Cheyenne, Frank?
I had a little bit of luck there, and it seemed to me like them bigger rodeos and stuff like that was easier than these regular little rodeos. Everybody takes a cinch deal. Everybody carries a second loop and stuff. Well, if there's many ropers as go to Cheyenne and places, 100, 150 so they don't need to carry a second loop. But I won enough to keep you wanting to go back and win more. But
yeah,
you didn't have to win first to get what you wanted. So if you had money to get home on, you're still pretty good shape. So
yeah, those go-arounds paid quite a bit up there then, and
yeah, they did.
You win a go-around, you can make the national finals sometimes, back then.
I believe he could have.
Cheyenne, I know.
You used to be able to.
Yeah.
If you won Cheyenne, you were a shoe-in. Until a certain point in the steer roping for sure.
Right.
But it's really something. It's really something. There is a very, very large amount of very, very successful rodeo cowboys come from this area right here. This area right here.
Yeah, they've had quite a bit of luck. Yes, sir.
As far as I can tell, one of the earliest ones that was the top-notch guys was Henry Grammer.
Yes.
To come to this area. I've read about him. They say he helped start the inaugural Calgary Stampede, and, he eventually moved his way down here, had a little trouble in Montana. But the prison warden loved him so much, they gave him a saddle when he left to ride to Oklahoma and a horse. So you told me that Henry Grammer might have been your dad's hero when they were younger. And what can you tell us about Henry Grammer? There's very, very few people that has first-hand accounts of any of him.
He was married to an Indian lady in Osage County. And she at that time had some land, and when he married her, they just broke out with getting along good. And anyway, she had 2 boys, and I knew both them boys, and they grew up to be alcoholics. They lived in town, and old Henry had already died and stuff. But anyway, he was a well thought of guy. My dad thought he should have been the president of the United States. But anyway, he liked him, but I've got a picture or 2 of him, and I've got a book that I've read about half of it. And anyway, he was everybody's hero. And I know they had a steer roping out here that my dad told about out in Osage County, about 10 miles out of town. And then the state of Oklahoma was trying to outlaw steer ropings. And that was kind of the favorite deal then. Instead of calf roping, they just steer ropings. But anyway, there was bunch of deputies and stuff was around that rodeo, and the first guy that run a steer down through there that's going to arrest him. So nobody would rope. So anyway, he got his horse, got on him, back to shoot, tied him down, and hell, them deputies and all them people just got in their cars and left. They didn't argue with him. But he was a well thought of guy. He wasn't bad as they thought he was. He'd actually killed 2 or 3 people. And one of them was over a roping. He was flagging the field. Henry Grammer was. And he flagged the guy out. Anyway, he started causing a lot of trouble. So he just killed him and went on. But
Think you'd argue with the judge.
He'd served a little time in the penitentiary and stuff for that. But he'd traveled a little bit, and he knew this woman that owned this property and stuff. They had cowboys and farmland and run cattle and stuff that way. But he was all time. If some farmer was having trouble doing this, that, or another, he'd take care of it. The people never would turn on him. He was a good guy. But anyway, that's just a type of person he was. You know, he didn't want nothing for nothing. He just was, you know, he'd rob a bank or something like that, you know, once in a while. But, you know,
didn't mean nothing by it.
No.
Yeah.
They had insurance, probably.
But my dad thought he was the greatest guy he ever saw. And
Well, he lived a life, though, seemed like.
Yeah, well liked. And
I'm interested to see how they portray him in this new movie, you know, that Killers of the Flower Moon. Who was it that played him that came to the museum?
His name's Sturgill Simpson. I gave him Frank's telephone number. I don't think he ever called him, but I gave him Frank's number and said, this is the closest connection to Henry Grammer he'll get, you know.
Yeah.
So.
But it's quite he was a hero and a good guy with it. And the guys that worked for him, they were supposed to have robbed a place where they make money and stuff out there around Denver. And Dad said one morning about daylight, he said he looked out the house, or out the window. He said there come that whole party. They'd been out there to rob the Denver Mint. So he said it's the only guy ever robbed the Denver Mint was him.
I heard a story one time. Somebody came to his house and they got into it, and he killed him right there and right off the front porch.
Yeah, he could do that. Yeah, yeah. It was just kind of a free for all, you know. But those 2 boys that he raised, and they were older than I was, but I knew them pretty well. Lewis and I forget the other's name right at the moment, but Bobby Donaldson was staying with them. They was drinking all the whiskey they could find, and anyway, one day come down there and he said, "Say, I got a pair of these old spurs that was Henry Grammer's." And I said, "How do you do?" He said, "I need $25 for them." I said, "Well, I believe I'll just take them." Anyway, I give them to Bob Clark over at the Fairfax Bank to hang up there. They're hanging there somewhere. And, you know, everybody knew him. Everybody knew him. He wasn't a holdout or one. He had a lot of whiskey makers back in those days, too. He furnished them all the sugar and the grain and stuff. He helped guys. And I know an old friend of mine that old Sid Delplane, he used to sell Buick cars. He said, Henry come in here one day and he said, "I've got to leave and be gone here for a week or 2. And he said, so-and-so's going to be in here and get a new car. And he said, I'll pay you when I get back. And they did, you know. They did just what they said they'd do. But one of these whiskey makers or something, you know, they was illegal to have whiskey and making it especially. So anyway, it just, that's the way things turned out back then, you know. It was a kind of an honor system. And but old Sid Delplane, I knew him real well, and he knew Henry Grammer. And and he was a car salesman too, and that's how they got along. You know, if a guy needed something, well, he'd get it if it's life or death. You know, but I know that in this book that I read here that he had killed a guy. He flagged the guy out that stair open, and that old boy was causing a lot of trouble. So he just pulled out his gun and shot him. So.
You think you know who he was talking to causing the trouble.
Yeah.
You think you knew old Henry.
Yeah.
You don't want to mess with Henry.
Yeah.
Well, the history books say he got killed in a car wreck,
Yeah.
but maybe not so much.
I think it's true. I do.
I mean, but he maybe was killed before he had the wreck.
Yeah, he was shot. He had a convertible car, and there's a lady driving it, and the guy was in there, and Henry was in the back seat or something, and they shot him, and then they had a wreck, and they never did finish up what the consequences was, you know, later on. But of course he was dead, but the other people lived, I guess. And but he was a well thought of guy. Everybody.
I think he had a whole lot of cash on him when they found him too, like $4,000, which was a ton of money back then, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I've read $10,000.
Okay, it might have been 10.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I read that part of it in the book too, but.
That's a lot of money to be having in your pocket today, Jimbo.
Yeah, I've never had that much.
$4,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
But he was definitely a legend here in Osage County, you know.
Oh yeah, he was.
And he must have been able to rope pretty good too.
Yeah, he was a professional roper, but in those days, you know, he was a go-getter.
Yeah.
And I know that he had people around him that kind of supported him and done what he asked. And some of them guys was going to go steal something or do this, that, or another, and he got wind of it, old Henry did. And he went to them guys and he said, do not, whatever you do not do what you're talking about doing. He said, that's wrong. How it was, I don't know. They was going to steal a bunch of stuff, then bring it up there to Henry's place. He didn't want it on his place, see? But everybody had the respect for him, and he wouldn't let nobody go hungry. And that is something that probably was his upbringing or something, but he was I think he come from Texas originally.
Might have.
And married this Indian woman.
Yeah.
I know my granddad on my mom's side was part Indians, and my great-grandmother and her brother was some of the original. There was 2,900 original Osage people, and then they were the backbone of the Osage tribe. So anyway, it's still running right now the same way it did when they become Osage County. Them Indians is the ones that brought it to a head. And they knew they'd been getting a lot of oil up in Kansas and Oklahoma being right south, and it went right into Osage County, and hell, they just went to drilling oil wells. Of course, the Indians had all the oil rights, and they could mine for gold or whatever they wanted to. They didn't have to ask the state for nothing. But and that highway that you guys come over on, that was one of the original wagon trains back and forth. But anyway, that was kind of before the telephone times, you know. And if you wanted something taken from Ponca City to Pawhuska, there was an Indian that would take that, whatever it was you had to send over there to Pawhuska from Ponca City. He said they'd run over there and run back. And he said they'd never eat. They'd take beef and pound it up until it was powdery, and then they'd take a little water and put with it, and that was their trip to Pawhuska, you know, and stuff. But anyway, them was hard times, you know, but it all worked out. So, but they still got all the mineral rights in Osage County, and it runs plumb from here to Tulsa, right in the north end of Tulsa. So, you know, it was a necessary thing to get it, the oil wells and natural gas, or through to hit gold, it belongs to the Indians. So that's how it works out. So,
Did you say that you're an Osage yourself?
yes.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, just a little bit, you know, probably eighth, maybe.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I read something here a few years ago. They said there's only 7 or 8 full-bloods left in the Osage tribe.
Could be, yeah.
And then I looked up, for some reason, we were out in New Mexico here a few months later after I heard that, and I got to wondering how many Navajos, full-bloods, there were. So we just looked it up.
Yeah.
Did you know there's over 300,000 of those that are full-blood? Yes. So it's really something else.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff, I mean, it just intrigues me for some reason, so just intrigues me. Did you ever get to go to Madison Square Garden and rope?
No, that was way before my time.
That was before your time? Well,
they was going to have a rodeo back there 2 or 3 years ago, but they never did have it, I don't think. But
yeah, this old COVID went down on everybody, and we haven't heard anything about it since.
Yeah. Well, that's used to have the Boston Square and 2 or 3 of the big road in Boston, something. But a boy that was a neighbor of ours was a bull rider, and he got to go back there one time, and he won one of them big rodeos then and paid a lot of money, and all he made it home with was 2 or 3 of them friends' jackets and all kinds of Indian wear and stuff. But he spent all his money.
Had him a good time. Oh, was that Jake Williams or Bob Wagner? Who was that?
Bobby Wagner.
Ended up being 1960.
Something, I can't remember.
60 or 62, I can't remember. World champion bull rider.
Yeah, he was.
He was a runner-up several years.
Yeah.
One of the best bull riders to ever live. He grew up right here. We had Jake Williams on the show here just a while back. He told us lots of good stories on.
Bob Wagner was a natural bull rider. He wasn't very tall, but he was real strong. And he wanted to draw the worst bull that they had. And if he drove one of them oldest high lopers, he'd fall off. But one of them bad ones, he could do it. But he grew up with us right out in the same neighborhood. He lived with us a lot. Dad would get him horses to break in the wintertime, you know, and stuff. But anyway, he was pretty interesting what he had got through. But he died, I forget what he had, something. He died at San Antonio, I think. He had something internally wrong with him. But he was made to be a straight bull rider. He was about 5'4" or 5" and strong as a bull. And he could do it, but he didn't care nothing about horses or nothing, but he break colts for Dad and other people around the neighborhood through the winter, and that's all he lived on. He never even had a job, didn't want a job, so. But he could get himself, you know, he was a stall walker or something, and he didn't want to talk to you or nothing when it come bull riding time. But anyway, he was a pretty good guy. Other than that, he was a straight German, and he'd always inventing something, you know, all the time. Some of it worked. Sometimes he'd sell the copyrights to it and stuff like that. That would be the only thing he'd ever make any money doing. But anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange deal, Jimbo. He started a rodeo association that was going to compete with the professional PRCA, Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. Well, anyway, I don't know what happened. I think they ended up kicking a big part of those guys that were going to do that other competing one out of the PRCA, wouldn't let them enter those rodeos. Well, Bob Wagner, he took it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
We got the Supreme Court book at the museum over there. but he lost at the end. So he lost the case. But that's really something.
Yeah.
To take a case all the way to the Supreme Court, because they don't hear but a handful of cases every year. It don't seem like.
You know what he was trying to do in those days is to get a job. You would buy teams, calf ropers, bulldoggers. You'd have a team of all them, and anyway, they did have a big argument over it, and Bob won it one time, some part of it. And he had $47,000. He beat him. He sued him for that much money and got it. And he didn't want it. He wanted them to have teams so if they could survive till spring and the rodeo. That's what it was for. Joe Green was the bull riding representative, and he said, "Say, you live up there with Bob Wagner?" And I said, "Sure do." He said, "Would you please tell him to quit messing with the RCA?" And he said, "He just tearing up this whole rodeo association." And I told him, I said, "You know what he's trying to do?" And he said, "There's no telling what he'd do." I said, "He's just trying to find a job in the wintertime to ride bulls and have broncs and stuff." And anyway, that was the starting and the stopping of doing anything with the RCA, but it's he had quite a tale of stuff that he had done and made and stuff. He made some spurs one time, and the contractors wouldn't let him hardly be around the rodeo with them spurs on. And he said, "Don't ride our bulls with them spurs you got on." And he had to quit, But anyway, they would work. They were just, the spur rails was pretty big, and they're just real rough and tough. It'd tear hide and all off them old bulls.
Help you stay on them.
Oh, yeah. But he's always coming up with something. And
what about the Dewey Roundup? Did you ever go there as a kid? Watch it?
A kid I was, yes.
Can you tell us what you remember about that place?
Well, we went over there one time, and I was pretty small, but they had a match rope in there. Everett Shaw and what's that little short guy?
Ike Rude.
Who?
Ike Rude.
Ike Rude. They had a match rope in there on grass. And my son, Buck, lives over there about a half mile from it, but anyway, I told him that, and he said, "Oh, that's where their high school is now." And I said, "Well, it was a rodeo ring in there one time," but anyway, he said, "Well, that's a little before my time." I said, "It was a long way before your time," but anyway, that's what we was doing over there, go really to watch that mass roping, and they had the roping otherwise too, but
everybody tells us that rodeo was big as Cheyenne or Pendleton or any of them in its day.
Yeah.
People come from everywhere. There'd be, I don't know, thousands and thousands of people, and all the best cowboys from all over the U.S. would descend in Dewey every year.
They brought them in from trains from Kansas City, people, fans.
Yeah. Well, that's right where it was at. And things like that, but I wasn't probably about 8-10 years old, maybe, something like that. But they just all at once, the old stadium fell over. It rotted down. They just regular wood things, and the sun just collapsed, and it might have killed somebody or something. They had quite a lot of...
Did it start fire, Jimbo? Did we read that in that book?
I don't think there was It
was a big collapse.
It just collapsed and really hurt some people. Like you said, might have killed some
I think it killed several people.
It might have, and that was the end of it.
That was the end of it.
It seemed like.
They don't even have a rodeo in Dewey now.
No.
Once the largest rodeo in the nation.
Yeah.
One of them.
It in Ada, Oklahoma.
Ada was a big rodeo.
Yeah. I saw a steer horse down there one time. Bob Crosby was there.
Oh, wow.
And it was a pretty interesting deal, and there was some people having a horse cutting contest there before the rodeo started, and had a big crowd around it. And anyway, old Bob Crosby got his horse, went out there and slipped the bridle off of him and had a guy ducking and diving in front of him. The crowd all went over around him and they made him quit so he could get to watch their rodeo, you know. But I remember that myself, but that's the only time I ever saw Bob Crosby. He was a
wild one, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I've seen some pictures of him roping steers, and boy, howdy, I would sure hate to be on that gray horse he's riding or bay horse he's riding in a couple of them, because it does look pretty wild. Some of the nastiest jerks I've ever seen. Jimbo said he used to do some of that wild stuff just for fun, he heard.
Yeah.
Jim said that he's known him to cut his cinch, strands on his cinch, and just leave 3 or 4 just to go tie a steer, just showing off, you know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he would do that. But,
they said he broke his leg like 6 times from having a horse jerk down on him, his right leg.
Well, I believe it. I saw an old famous photo of him showing his leg off to people. He was real proud of all those scars on his leg because he was showing them off, and everyone was gathered around looking at it.
Well, what was it? Pate told us down there that he used to sit up there at Pendleton, just throw his leg over the saddle horn during the bronc ride and try to rope on them broncs when it come by.
He did. Clark told me that himself, and they said me and old Crosby was sitting there in the shade while the rodeo was going on, and he said they rode some wild mules or something. He said when one had come by, he said old Crosby had his leg across his horn. Said he had his rope tied on the horse all the time. Said he just throwed that loop out there and picked up both front legs off that horse. Said damn near killed him.
Yeah.
He said people got to watching him more than they did the rodeo and made him quit.
Yeah, Pake said that's one of his ambitions, to get killed in front of a large crowd.
Well, the way it sounds, it must have been. I'm surprised he didn't get it done.
Yeah.
You know, that's where old Sonny Davis lived in his place at Kenna, New Mexico. And there's a lot of stories told out there, you know, about him that didn't get out of whack about old Crosby. But he was something was a little bit wrong with him. I know he broke his leg one time that the guy told me about him, and said he wouldn't go to the doctor or nothing. He said he took an old inner tube, tied it together at the bottom, and filled it up with cow manure. And he come through here one time going to New York or somewhere back there, and he stopped at my granddad's place. He said that had the worst smell about it that you ever seen. Said it wonder didn't this rot off. So
good Lord.
But he was out there at their place for overnight or something. But
that just seems like a bad idea.
He's a little bit crazy, no kidding.
They didn't call him Wild Horse Crosby for nothing.
No, but Clark knew him pretty well. He told a lot of stuff about him, and that was interesting to me. You know, of course, he was all going to the same rodeos and stuff.
Yeah.
But he was crazy. I think they found his hat and had his billfold and pocket knife and stuff in it, and he run off a bridge out there and killed himself. That's kind of what Clark, you know, said, and I would have to believe it. So,
did they say he was going down a hill and lost control of his Jeep? And I think it's called, is it Bob Crosby Pass to this day, or Wild Horse Pass or something like that?
Probably Ravine or something. They named it after him.
Yeah, so he lost control of his.
Yeah.
I guess he drove a Jeep everywhere with a little horse trailer on it.
Well, that. He drove them little Jeeps and stuff. That's what he rodeoed out of. So I remember seeing that thing myself. But anyway, he was a person all in a person, you know. Nobody else could do what he done. So he was a pickup man up at Cheyenne. And he said them bronc riders, that he was a pickup man. Said them bronc riders would look back and see, where's Crosby at? If he was behind them, so they just jump off anyway. Yeah, it was kind of fun, you know. But them days is gone. You know?
Where all did you make the national finals at, Frank, when you were roping? Because it traveled around. It still travels around in the steer roping quite a bit. So what were the towns that you roped in when you made the national finals?
Well, I think one year we went to Pahuska.
Yes, sir.
and maybe one at Veneta, and maybe one at McAllister, I think. I think that's the 3 that I went to, but, at that time I didn't even know what they was talking about hardly, but just be another roping, but you rope 10 heads, see, but...
That picture behind you, Cody, is Frank at Pawhuska, 1964, at the finals. See, he's got his back number on and everything.
That's a great picture.
That steer.
That's a great picture.
Yep.
What do you think about the arena over there in Pawhuska?
Oh, that's the best roping in the world, I think. It was, and they got some new operators in there, and the last time I went over there just to watch it, the little cattle would weigh about 550 or something, and just run through there like a wild man, and they'd throw a trip behind one and go so fast and so hard to the end of it, them cattle would go and hit the ground, they jump right straight up. And there was a lot of cattle got up that day, but they had to just slow their moat down and, do the right thing, and they could have tied any of them down, but they just used to these short scores and stuff. But I know we roped some steers at, I think it was Anita, and they weighed 940 pounds across the scales in case they broke one's neck or something. They know how much to charge for him. So anyway, that's a pretty big steers, and they plowed her about a foot deep too, because when one had hit the ground, you're going to get another jerk. So.
And you said that was at Veneta?
Veneta, yeah.
If you haven't been to that rodeo grounds, if you like the history of rodeo, I would highly suggest just going to Veneta, looking at it.
Yeah.
When the rodeo's not even going on, because the way that's built, it's the way they all used to be built. They were really grand, big things for the town. Veneta, that's an old one. Burwell, Nebraska, that's another one that hasn't changed in a long time. The way that the arena's set up and the grandstands and stuff.
But there's some steers we roped one time. They was summered here, wintered here, and summered there, and then we roped them. And I'm telling you, when you got the end of it, you was better be hanging on. So, but they just don't rope them kind no more. But they was fun to rope, really. And to me, it's more fun to rope a horned steer off out in the pasture. He's ducking away from you, and you're ducking away from him. And boy, there'll be some wrecks, But them days is past. They don't have any horned cattle anymore. So, anyway.
Jimbo, I just been sitting here thinking about this for a long time, ever since he told me. His dad was a little bit of a roper, roped in the pasture a little bit. Mm-hmm. But Frank taught himself how to rope.
Right.
And taught himself how to rodeo rope.
Right.
And guess who else he taught? He has 2 boys that were real successful rodeo ropers.
Bucky and Barry.
And that same teaching, he's got grandsons, top 20 in the world. Well, that's really saying something for a guy that taught himself everything, and all that thing he taught is still going on today in the same bloodline.
He taught himself, so they didn't have to.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to go through that, but that's pretty impressive for somebody to learn to take care of those horses and everything goes into that, and still make the national finals.
Be one of the top guys in the world.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
I think so. Well, Frank, we sure appreciate you having us in your house today and telling us all these great rodeo stories and your family stories, and we sure appreciate it.
Yeah, we sure thank you.
And right over there at the museum, we got a whole deal to Frank and his sons and his grandson and everybody. You can learn about the whole family over there. And we'll just see everybody next week right here on the Cowboys of the Osage podcast. Thank you, Jimbo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Appreciate it.
No doubt.